Join us as Ambassador Susan Johnson Cook has a conversation with Judge Gabrielle Kirk McDonald about her historic journey. Judge McDonald has been a pioneer from her beginnings to becoming the president of the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia. This is Conversations with Ambassador Sujay.
Good afternoon. We're here today. We welcome you to the Sag Harbor Summer Speakers Series, and we're so excited to have with us today Judge Gabrielle Kirk McDonald. Can we welcome her? And she really doesn't need a welcome because you're really part of us, and we're so happy to have you living in the Hamptons, and we're excited about what you do. When I was leaving for Washington, and there was the send-off, 86 women at B. Smith's, and there was the send-off to the Senate confirmation hearings. I hadn't even been confirmed yet, but you stood up at the very end and you said, I want to tell you what she's about to go into. It's not one of these comfy ambassadorships, but she's actually going to go into religious freedom, which is a really major issue. And I think people really don't understand what you did as well, because she is all over the globe. Her name is revered and honored. She was the UN War Crimes Tribunal judge, the first African American, but you didn't just get there. You worked for it. It was a journey. So let me ask you, you went to Howard University. Why did you choose Howard, and what was going on in the year that you were there?
Well, actually, I remember what I said was that yours was not a fluff job. I remember that because it's not a fluff job. You know, a lot of times people think that, oh, you're an ambassador and that means it's kind of a gratuitous thing, you know. Exactly. No, it was a very serious position. So I commend you and thank you for having me.
Thank you.
I applied to one law school, and that was Howard. And it was in 1963. And that's because I wanted to be a civil rights lawyer. I didn't want to be a lawyer, I wanted to be a civil rights lawyer. And that was a very disturbing time in our history. Unfortunately, it seems like that we're returning to that time. And Howard Law School was really the legal think tank for the civil rights movement. The architects of the movement, beginning with Charles Hamilton Houston, Thurgood Marshall, Frank Reeves, you can just name so many of them. That's where I wanted to be.
So the year was 63?
At the 100th anniversary of the Emancipation Proclamation, and I was in New York at Hunter College, and there was a celebration of the Emancipation Proclamation at the New School. And I was introduced to these great black scholars. Then, of course, it was Negro scholars, as we were referred to. But
so you were
that's where I wanted to be.
3 years you were in law school there?
Yes.
So where was Dr.
King? One law school, and it was Howard in Washington, D.C. I don't know what would have happened if Howard hadn't accepted me, but that's where I wanted to be.
So tell us about Dr. Martin Luther King. I mean, there were a whole lot of things happening in civil rights. And so you were a young woman in civil rights, interested in civil rights. Interesting. What was happening with Dr. King? Who else were the names at that time?
Oh, my goodness. Well, you know, we had the March on Washington in 1963. Right before that, Dr. Martin Luther King had written his letter from Birmingham. It was the three civil rights workers had been murdered recently, but really it was before that I was kind of touched by the horror that we were subjected to, because I was in Teaneck, New Jersey, going to school there, and I was seeing things on TV. At Central High School in Little Rock, Emmett Till, when I was, 13, all of those things kind of impacted me, and it kind of came together in 1963.
So do you think your passion was birthed out of your pain? Were the painful moments birthed your passion?
That's a very good question. I think so. And we'd even have to go back further. I remember my mother was biracial, and she looked white. And I remember she rented an apartment in Riverdale, and I was 9 years old, eight years old, I guess, at the time. And when I showed up, there was a problem. And that's when there was an attempt to really to put us out. And I can remember going to school, as we all have, and being subjected to the N-word, and it was pretty tough. It really was. And this was not in Little Rock. Right. This was not in the South. This was in New York. And I remember I had one friend, Mary Ann Heffernan. Her father was a fireman, as the name might suggest. Yes. And I remember her telling some of the friends who would chase me home, as tall as I am, I'm not really that courageous physically. I'm running home. And she said, you know, she went to Florida and she just has a tan. And you know, and to this day I think about that many years later, and I never really, I don't think I corrected that, but it didn't work, so I was still the N-word. Yes. And so it got so bad that I ran away at 9 years old. Would you believe? Oh my goodness. I had my little red briefcase and I packed it up and put a lot of t-shirts on, and Mary Ann Heffernan and I were gone. Wow. And the police picked us up. Thank goodness it wasn't. Yeah. Thank goodness I wasn't a black man. It might have turned out differently. They picked us up and called her father, and he came and got us, and I guess and then my mother said, well, what am I going to do with this black child? And so she sent me to my grandparents in Minnesota, in St. Paul, and it was there that I had the safety of being in a predominantly black neighborhood. And I remember that. And the curious thing is, and I've just thought about this recently since I retired, the street that I lived on in Riverdale was on Netherlands Avenue. Oh, wow. So, and that was in 1951, because I have a missile that's engraved well, by my mother, and it's 1951. 42 years later, I was in the Netherlands.
Isn't that amazing?
As an international judge. Wow. Now, who would have thunk, as you say? But that's the impact of racism. And it's how you can kind of turn it around. Yes, it was, my interest was born out of pain, but there was a way to turn it around with a lot of help.
So you went through Howard Law School, and then you ended up in Texas.
Well, no, I went to Howard, and then I joined the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. Okay. Because again, I applied to one law school, I knew what I wanted to do, and I wanted to, when I graduated, work for a civil rights organization, and the NAACP Legal Defense Fund was the premier civil rights organization that had argued more civil rights cases in the Supreme Court than any other organization. Thurgood Marshall, I was there a couple of years, and then I married and went to Texas. Okay. I found out about my husband-to-be when I was arguing a case in St. Louis, and they said, "Oh, he's a tall, handsome." I didn't know whether he could read or write, but I took my but we met, and we worked on a case together. Actually, someone contacted the Legal Defense Fund. They wanted to file a case in Houston, and I selected him as the attorney to work with us on the local level. And I got to Houston, and then we really became civil rights lawyers.